Good afternoon and welcome to the latest episode of the podcast with a K. I've previously explained that, so I'm not going to do it again just for the sake of timing. But we are live and livid in the studio at Projekt Renewable down at the Alexandra Dock. We've been here all day with a bunch of people from the Crown Estate and talking internships, and we just wanted to know a little bit more about that. So I've got two guests with me today, and it's just occurred to me that their names allow me to introduce this podcast as Tom, Dick and Harry. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Afternoon.
How you doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Good. So let's start with Tom.
Yep.
Excellent. I've got it right already. Tell us a little bit, Tom, about what you do and really why you're here today.
Yep. So I'm Tom Brady, the environment and consent specialist, not the NFL player. So apologies to our American listeners. I work for Orsted, been working for Orsted from 2023, and before that I was doing the Marine Futures internship. I'm an environment consent specialist based in London and up in Grimsby for this podcast and see our interns.
Excellent. Harry, what about you?
Yeah, so like Tom, I work for Orsted. I'm also an environment and consent specialist. I started a year before Tom. And I also did the Marine Futures internship based on the West Coast in 2021. Like Tom, we're up here to see our interns and meet up with some of the teams that we work with in the East Coast Hub.
And you've arrived today as we've been doing another plant and paddle session, and a lot of the interns from Crown Estate have been in the water. Some of them have been in the wars, as we've seen as well. There's been a little bit of blood. We won't talk about that. And obviously planting for the biodiversity wildlife corridors around the dock. I know when you arrived, you were talking to our gardening team about that. Is it something that you're interested in generally?
Well, living in London, I don't have a garden myself, but it is something that I'm interested in. I'd love to get into planting and gardening and all that kind of things, but yeah.
What about you, Tom?
Yeah, same. I think especially the paddle and planting, it's something that we did the internship, going seagrass planting, looking at the kind of the meadows, and as Harry said, we don't really get that in London. It's the concrete jungle, so there's no chance of that, but it's something that we'd definitely be interested in doing if we could.
It really has, as a programme, opened up a lot of eyes to really what the planting is for as well, and I think that's the most important part of the whole scheme is the addition of biodiversity and natural habitat around the water, and certainly that's where our engagement with the Crown Estate has sort of brought us to. And you guys really, from an internship perspective, I think it might be quite useful for the listeners to understand exactly what an internship is. So if you could go back to the beginning of your journey to where you are today and talk us through, from both of your perspectives, a little bit about how you got into into that internship and really how you've ended up with Orsted today.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So it was straight after university. So I was at Cardiff University. Did a 4-year course of a year in industry, which itself was an internship over in Malta. Came back and finished off my degree, which is marine geography. And I was on the fence, between getting a job and then potentially even going travelling. It was actually my mum that found this internship, and she just told me to kind of put an application together and go for it because of the collaborative nature of the internship. And I think it can be a bit daunting after spending 4 years of university to go for an internship because it feels like a step backwards. But this one had so many kind of potential opportunities, being with 4 kind of key players in the marine industry, that it felt like it'd be a bit silly not to put an application for. So put the application in, did the kind of interview process, got the internship with another intern called Amber. We kind of went to Cumbria Wildlife Trust on your first day. You're introduced to the team, where we were based in the Wildlife Trust in Cumbria, and from there you kind of just given a plethora of opportunities in terms of projects, a joint project. There's like festivals we can kind of like do for reaching out to the communities, and then there's the kind of research side of things and the field work, going to seal surveys, seagrass, and it was this kind of variety in this internship that you might not get at a job, which is a bit more defined. And I think that's what an internship offers, is it helps you find where you want to go. It gives you all these opportunities, and then you find your path and you can focus in on it, and at the end of the internship hopefully you found that path where you want to continue. And that's kind of how it helped me get into the job I'm in today.
It sounds like an ideal way in, Harry, really, to sort of almost try before you buy or try before you commit. And in many ways you find out what you like faster, and in many ways you find out what you don't like faster, because a lot of people take jobs on straight out of university and don't necessarily enjoy them.
Yeah.
This way you've got the perfect opportunity to trial that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's true. I've had it from kind of both sides. So I had a different kind of way into the environmental industry. I studied civil and coastal engineering at Plymouth, and I did a placement year at Heathrow Airport, mainly on the runways, kind of doing lots involving concrete and asphalt. Kind of realised that wasn't for me, and then went back to uni, went back into more of a specialist area, looking at environmental impacts of renewable energy projects. And then I managed to find the internship that was absolutely perfect for me, and I applied and I got it, and it was definitely the best experience that I could have hoped for.
I have visions now that you've mentioned Heathrow of an intern with a clipboard in the middle of runway 2 being told off by a traffic control. Is that how it worked?
That is almost exactly what happened.
That's slightly worrying for anybody that's ever taken off or landed at Heathrow. That's why I know your face from... No, I'm kidding. It's fascinating for me because I didn't go down the road of internship and went straight into the industry that I worked in for so many years. But if I had my time over again, it would be quite nice, I think, and to sort of have almost an appetizer of an industry, and as you just said then, it led you somewhere else as a result. And that's our natural curiosity, isn't it, Tom, really, that allows us to sort of try stuff and become a specialist, not try and start as a specialist.
Yeah, exactly. We're all kind of unskilled in these jobs when we start off. Like, I didn't know what environment and consent specialist was at all before the internship, and even during the internship I didn't know this job was for me. And with this internship being 4 organisations, so Orsted, the Crown Estate, Natural England and the Wildlife Trust, as you say, you're getting those appetisers of each kind of section of that industry. So you've got the NGO, so the non-government organisation, a charity working to protect the wildlife, got Natural England, who's a statutory nature conservation body, arm's length government body, and then you've got the Crown Estate, kind of sovereignty, kind of owning this seabed that lease it to the offshore wind developers like Orsted, and they develop, construct and operate those offshore wind. And where you place in that is obviously when you become an intern you have no clue, but you get like these little tastes of each company and you see where you want to work. So working for the Wildlife Trust doing some community outreach, I really enjoyed that. But it was when I was doing my independent projects with Orsted and working with the people there, and it was actually the networking. You become close with the people you work with, and you think, I could probably work with these people in this job, and that's what helped kind of funnel me down that way.
Do you think, Harry, that the collaboration that Tom's just described is that people are aware of that? I think it's quite sort of telling in the UK that we know a little bit about seemingly a lot, but actually we know a little bit about a little bit, really, and all of what happens in your world and the wonderful degree of collaboration that clearly happens in your world is taking the country forward. How would you go about explaining what you do to the wider world rather than just to the industry?
It's a really good point. I think we live within our own little bubble of collaboration within industry, and we can see all of the opportunities in front of us and all of the amazing developments that are going on in our industry. But for the everyday person, that's not really visible. And I would just say that there's a lot going on. There's so many good companies doing good things. We need initiatives that are opening doors for people that don't necessarily have those kind of opportunities. There's just interesting stuff going on. So
there's definitely, we talked about this earlier on, didn't we? There's definitely more of an awareness gap than there is potentially, although not necessarily the skills gap, which is what everybody hears and reads about. But you're living examples of people that have bridged that gap and gone ahead and learned and are now specialising in that world. What would you say to anybody sitting today listening to this that's thinking that sounds like fun? How do I get into that? How did you get into that?
Well, as I said, my mum.
Of course, yeah. Don't forget your mum.
So big thanks to Helen for that. And but the main thing was just looking around and not being scared of internships, because I think you can be focused on a career and a job, But as we've said, the internship gives you that kind of maybe a step into something that you didn't know you wanted. But there's a lot of work that we should probably do on our side as well. You know, we've discussed earlier, starting at the kind of bottom, the younger audiences, making them aware of our presence, you know, offshore wind, renewable energy, and trying to encourage people to think about that as a career growing up. And I think for me, what we try to do now is a university outreach. We go back to university. I never knew about this during my university kind of like segment. I only knew of it when I finished and I was actively looking. But we're trying to go back now to kind of third year or before and just show the range of careers that they can do with the skills they've got at university, and be that internships, be that actual jobs. I think it's just raising that profile at kind of each stage of education.
What was quite interesting, Harry, a survey was done in Grimsby a couple of years ago actually by the NSPCC, and they surveyed primary schools about their understanding and their knowledge of the renewable energy sector. Obviously, this is Grimsby's opportunity with it being largely on our doorstep. And the question that they asked was, what would you like to know about renewable energy? And the answer that they got overwhelmingly was, everything sooner, please. So you just described, Tom, the journey back into the university sector. Is there a case for going all the way back to primary school?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's initiatives like the STEM ambassador initiatives, which I think they work all the way back to primary schools. So people from industry collaborate, go into primary schools and just let the kids know about some of the initiatives that are happening, some of the really interesting projects that are out there. The Wildlife Trust, they do a lot of work with primary school children. So during our internship, we were involved with community outreach involving local primary schools, going rock pooling, teaching them about the marine environment. And that was really rewarding for me. But it's super important that we're letting the younger generation know about all this interesting stuff.
And of course, it's quite hard to sort of draw a tangible link between the impact that has on a primary school child and their later life, because nobody necessarily sees that impact. But it shouldn't mean that you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I absolutely commend you and the organisations that you're working for and with of trying to bring that forward as far as possible to a younger generation. But without that sort of outreach, I guess, is probably the best word. We're going to struggle, aren't we, as a community, as a wider community, to understand it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Tom. We got interrupted there by an electrical device in the corner of the studio, which is still bubbling away, but if we wait for that, we'll be waiting for the end of time. So we were talking about that outreach to the next generation, and you know, you're not a million miles away from that, you two. And I stand here as a very old man, and you irritatingly young. But that whole notion that we start to want to learn sooner can only come from the development, the teaching around that subject. Do you think that's getting missed in schools at the moment?
It may be getting missed, but I think the best we can do is try to support it. So, as Harry said, the Wildlife Trust currently do with their kind of teaching opportunities out in the field. You know, it's something we've discussed is the stuff you remember most at school is doing the fun stuff outside, seeing it in action, and maybe that's how we should be telling the story of renewable energy is kind of doing kind of physical activities, maybe creating a turbine out of some household material, you know, and making it a fun thing to learn about, just so that it's associated with a good memory rather than a boring, maybe lecture kind of memory for kids.
Not all lectures are boring, I should hasten to add, but most of them are. I think you're absolutely right, and that tangible, almost learn by play, which of course is the Scandinavian model and may explain why the Scandinavian renewables industry is so far ahead of the rest of the world. But that whole notion that you learn by doing, I think there's a big case for that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. That's how I learn the best way. Yeah, absolutely. If you can get kids to go out and enjoy something and have fun, then they're going to retain that information so much more easily than if they're just sat in a classroom.
Final question to both of you. First time in Grimsby today? No, you've been here a few times. You're resident, I gather, now at the Kingsway Hotel. Very swanky, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never been. What have you seen in terms of progress of not just the town, but also the people and the understanding of the opportunities that are right on their doorstep, but nobody can see. Have you seen a tangible progress?
I'd say we're biased probably, because although we come to Grimsby, we come monthly, if not less than that, just to visit there's an East Coast hub, which is where a lot of our East Coast projects operate out of, and we'll come here to do meetings, meet the team, and we'll typically stay, as you say, at the Kingsway, and we'll typically get the same taxis, and so they're all familiar with Orsted because they ferry people to the docks and back, and so our experience of people's knowledge of Orsted is quite high because they've worked with a lot of our colleagues, whereas we discussed earlier that it's not the wider reflection of Grimsby, and I can kind of understand that because it's hidden away on the docks, I suppose, the hub itself, and there's other renewable energy offshore wind companies there. It's an old fishing dock, but now it's kind of converting itself, but that's not displayed to the town itself. They're very far apart. So yeah, it depends on the presence of ourselves in the town centre.
And that's kind of why we're here, Harry. Projekt Renewable was founded to provide that sort of billboard, if you like, for the opportunities that already exist. Because this doesn't have to be built; it's already existing, already working, already providing hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs in the wider supply chain. So I guess the thing to do here is rip out the gates and the docks and let everybody come down and find out. I know that's easier said than done. But on the basis that people buy with their eyes, if they could see what's happening down, certainly at Orsted on the Royal Dock there, it really would open a lot of people's eyes up, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've got a really interesting kind of room within the East Coast Hub, which is like an interactive room which we bring primary school kids down to, and they can like kind of explore the world of offshore wind through doing, as we were speaking about earlier. But yeah, it's really interesting just being on the docks, walking around, seeing the massive SOV vessels, the service operation vessels that go out to the wind farm for weeks on end. Seeing lots of activity taking place, technicians going off on board and onto the boats. Yeah, it's an interesting place.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the podcast with a K. We'll explain that to you one day, I'm sure. It's been a pleasure both meeting you and listening to your experiences as interns. I think it sounds like a fantastic way for people to get into an industry and learn whether they want to learn. So it's a great starting point. And it's been a pleasure to have you in Grimsby today in the sunshine, because the sun always shines in Grimsby, as you know. My name is Richard Askham. You've been listening to the Projekt Renewable podcast with a K. And let's call this episode Tom, Dick and Harry.
Lovely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yay!